Welcome to Tekeek's Movie Explained. I am your host Subham, and today, I am going to explain an action drama sci-fi film called V for Vendetta. Watch out for spoilers. And also check the link in the description to watch the movie for free. A government should be of the people, for the people, and by the people. But what should one do, when the very institution created to protect its citizens causes suffering? In this dystopian future, when the nation's people have given up much of their freedom to live comfortable lives, now living under an iron fist regime, privacy is all but vanished. However, the promised utopia is now being haunted by the corpses it's built upon. Eve is preparing to head out for the evening. At the same time, a masked man prepares the TV and plays a talk show with the host Pradharo. Speaking his mind, he speaks of the former United States of America and how it has decayed into war and anarchy. He's proud that Britain has managed to maintain its prosperity and blames America's downfall and godlessness. He then recalls when Britain itself was tested by God and says that it has to be a country of people with different religions, different races, and homosexuality. Outside, she runs into Fingerman Footman for Nosfire, the nation's ruling political party. Evie immediately apologizes, but the men grabbed her planning to do the unspeakable. But the masked man appears. He quotes Hamlet before taking out a dagger. The man attacks him, but he dodges each blow gracefully. The masked man successfully disables the Fingerman one by one before turning to Evie. The man then enters an elaborate monologue telling Evie who, what, and why he is, but finishes by introducing himself as Evie, then invites Evie to a concerto he's attending. Evie was still shaken by what happened, reluctantly agrees. In this dystopian future, the United States has collapsed, and Britain appears to be one of the few nations that managed to survive the global catastrophe. Britain has fallen under a totalitarian government run by the Nosfire Party. Curfews are in effect. Fingerman roams the streets and people live comfortable but restricted lives. Evie agrees to join V, probably as thanks for his rescue. But these bravado, charisma, and strangely captivating eloquence make it hard to refuse. V dons a Guy Fawkes mask. This mask has long been a symbol for Guy Fawkes, a Christian revolutionary who on November 5, 1605 tried to destroy Parliament along with all the lords in an attempt to displace King James. With a Christian ruler. In this world, Fawkes's mask could be a symbol for those who opposed the government. They arrive on the top of a building in front of the Old Bailey, and as the church bells ring, November the 5th begins. V then takes out a conductor's baton and begins conducting an invisible orchestra. To Evie's surprise, the music slowly fills the air. The music seems to be coming from the street public announcement system. The tune playing in it is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. As the crescendo hits, explosions and fireworks fill the night sky. Evie watches in horror as the buildings collapse, with music in sync as V is in complete ecstasy and laughing maniacally. Later, Chancellor Sutler and the prominent members of the Nosfire Party discussed Bailey's destruction. Sutler is infuriated, demanding answers from the Fingerman leader, Mr. Creedy. Creedy's response says all witnesses have been detained ahead of citizen surveillance. Mr. Etheridge is tasked to blacklist the 1812 Overture, banning it in all forms of media. Mr. Dascom, the one in charge of the media, comes up with a cover story and will be informing the people that the Old Bailey had to undergo an emergency demolition. V and Evie were captured on surveillance cameras, and the lead inspector, Mr. Finch, is working on identifying and capturing them. Sutler stresses the importance of finding the culprit, as his actions are threatening everything that they built. We had destroyed the Old Bailey on the celebration of the 5th of November. Demolishing a building is a tremendous undertaking, and it appears that we had managed to do it all on his own. The music playing on the intercom suggests that he's also able to hack into the government's mainframe. It's noticeable that Creedy had detained witnesses and Sutler asked to blacklist the 1812 Overture. Both of these, paired with Dascom's media manipulation, indicate the Nosfire has the entirety of the citizens under control. Lying to the public to avoid mass hysteria seems to be the primary goal for Sutler. It's also worth noting that Sutler seems to be threatened by just one individual's actions, indicating that it could be hiding something. In the source material, the Chancellor's name is Adam Susan. It's changed to Adam Sutler in the film to invoke similarities to the name Hitler. Sutler is the model after several real-life dictators. In the film, he speaks to the council via a large screen with only his head shown. Also, a deliberate decision to invoke in 1984 Big Brother mood. Also, of all of the Sutler's appearances in the meetings, he only blinks once. Dascom is at the BTN network building later that morning. Overseeing the news broadcast, someone asked to ask if you think so public would believe it, and ask him replies saying BTM reports the news fabricating it as the government's job. Coincidentally, Evie is also there working as an intern. She watches the news report about Bailey when her colleague asks her about the night. Not meeting and cancelling the meeting with Gordon, their boss. Finch is at the station with his partner, Dominic. Looking over photos of We, they then get a lead on Evie and Set OU. Meanwhile, Evie meets with Gordon, and apologies to him for the previous night. In the office the next day, Evie is delivering packages. She opens one of them and is surprised to see a fox mask. Finch and Dominic are on their way to BTN. They hurry as he wants to talk to Evie before the fingermen get to her, thinking that we could be plotting something. Evie tries to leave. Unfortunately, she's too late as We appears with the bomb strapped to his chest. As We takes control of the newsroom, Finch and the police arrive. Evie moves with the evacuation of Finch to see her and she gets spooked. She runs through a room and hides under a table and Dominic misses her. Television suddenly cut to black. When it reappears, We is in view. When Evie saw Finch and Dominic, she probably thought that they were fingermen. They prompted her to run. As we will find out later, Nosfire and the Finger Man play a much bigger role in Evie's life. She's afraid of the very real possibility of her disappearing at the hands of the fingermen. As Dascom said, people don't trust their governments but trust the news. Unfortunately, the government in this country controls the news. An ironic twist of fate is that We is the one using Sutler's tools of oppression to liberate the people. He's also noticeably using something Nosfire also used to control the people, fear. A recorded message from We plays and everyone watching the channel listens intently. We speaks about how the country is decade of freedom once flourished, but fear now reigns. Streets and out filled with cameras and wiretaps promoting fear and submission. Injustice, cruelty and oppression now run the nation. We blames the people but understands that war and disease have plagued the country and the people had no choice but to turn to Sutler and Nosfire, who promised peace and order in exchange for obedience and complacency. We reveals that it was he who destroyed the old Bailey to remind the country of the forgotten holiday. We then narrates the story of the gunpowder treason when Guy Fawkes and his co-conspirators sought out the destruction of Parliament. He then makes a declaration and invites those who feel that the government has wronged them to stand outside the Parliament building in a year where he plans to rejuvenate the holiday and edge it deeper into the country's history. Disease, death, and war had pushed the citizens to the edge. In desperation, they turned to Sutler for salvation. Maybe the Nosfire party originally had good intentions, but with the ends justify the means, it can be seen that the people under Sutler's regime are content, they're living stable lives, but one could argue that they were just comfortable prisoners. The police finally get the doors open. They see a masked figure and shoot it. Finch unmasks the man only to find that the hostages are all wearing masks. In the control booth, Dascom finds a bomb. The police escort everyone out when We reveals himself. He attacks the officers, making quick work of them. Meanwhile, Dascom successfully manages to defuse the bomb. We is on his way out when Dominic catches him and holds him at gunpoint. Evie appears and maces Dominic. Dominic knocks her out and has disabled Dominic. Evie later awakens on a bed confused. She makes her way out of the room and finds herself in what appears to be tunnels filled with artwork, books, and a myriad of things branded illegal by Nosfire. We appears and welcomes Evie to his home, Shadow Gallery. Evie realizes what she had done and immediately regrets it. She intends to leave, but We stops her, telling her that she would surely be taken in and tortured by Creedy's fingermen. Evie promises to keep his lair a secret, but We is convinced that the only way to keep both of them safe is to keep Evie confined for a year until the next 5th of November. Evie then shouts at him and leaves. Wee's home is filled with items that the government has deemed immoral and a threat to the country's stability, but most of the items are works of art, music, books, and sculptures. This is peculiar detail. Artists have long been known to be the first to protest against injustice. The decision to take Evie is rooted in Wee's humanity. He felt responsible for Evie. She helped him escape. In the source material, Evie is a prostitute, whom he is training to be his replacement. Wee is also less humanized in the graphic novel, behaving more like an unnatural force or phantom, bent on exacting revenge on those who wronged him. Convincing a nation to do better was never his priority in the novel. At the station, Dominic and Finch discovered that Evie's parents were imprisoned and they both had died. Ev's brother had also been one of the first victims of the St. Mary's virus. Evie wakes up the following morning and apologizes to Wee, but she notices Wee's scarred hands. Wee puts gloves on and off for Evie breakfast. She asks about the TV broadcast and Wee says that he meant every word of it. Evie doubts the blowing of Parliament will do much to convince the people, and she predicts that everyone would be too scared to show up. Wee then argues that the government should be afraid of the people, not the other way around. He hopes that the act of destroying the Parliament will serve as a symbol for the people. Wee believes that people give symbols a meaning, and with enough people, a symbol can change the world. Prothero is in his bathroom when Wee appears behind him. Prothero falls and Wee looms over him, calling him Commander. Prothero is confused, but Wee says that Prothero was a commander when they met years ago. Prothero suddenly remembers the past. His eyes filled with recognition, regret, and fear. Moments later, he and Dascom are at Pradha's bathroom with Pradha's lifeless body there holding a rose. Dascom brainstormed and said they should break the news, as he knows the loss of the boys of London in such a gruesome manner would undoubtedly spark controversy. Dascom's mind is at work again. He's quick to figure out a possible headline for Pradha's death to avoid a public outcry. A little detail about Evie's origin has also been discovered. Her parents were apparently protesters of Nos Fire, but she doesn't appear to share the same sentiment. Wee calls Prothero General and seems to be on a mission to hunt people from his past. Prothero had briefly recognized Wee, but his eyes were also filled with remorse. It would seem that Wee is exacting revenge, but not only is he killing those that have wronged him, but he's also bent on toppling the empire they have created. Meanwhile, Wee's busy reenacting a scene from his favorite movie, which awakens Evie. Wee invites Evie to watch with him and she agrees. At the station, Dominic discovers that Prothero has died from lethal injection. Finch discovered that Prothero was a major stockholder in Viadox Pharmaceutical. Dominic points out that St. Mary and Viadox coming up in their investigation as peculiar. At the Shadow Gallery, news of Pradha's death breaks. Evie gets a chill and asks Wee if he did it, to which Wee admits. He reasons out that it was out getting justice. Finch finds Pradha's extensive military records but finds it odd how he's been mysteriously placed in charge of a detention facility in Larkhill. He summarizes that Larkhill could be the key to their investigation. Later, Evie tells Wee that she wants to help him with his plan in any way that she can. She tells a story about her parents and how their lives changed when Evie's brother died due to the St. Mary virus, and after his death, Evie's parents became political. One night, they got picked off by Credence Fingerman and were never seen again. Evie wishes she had been braver like her parents, but she's too afraid. Wee's favorite movie is The Count of Monte Cristo, the story of a man who has been left and returns to exact revenge on his enemies. He probably relates to this movie as a parallel to his life. Evie tells Wee that she wants to help him. This could be a genuine act as she finally follows in her parents' footsteps. However, this could also just be a means for her to escape Wee. Later, Evie is granted her request when Wee asks for her help with his next target. Meanwhile, Finch and Dominic find out that the detention camp had an abnormally high number of doctors and the priest was the highest paid person in the facility. The same priest in Wee's list, Bishop Lilliman. At the convent, the bishop is told his request is waiting for him. When he enters the room, Evie, dressed in skimpy clothing, greets him. Evie tries to warn him to confess everything that's happened to her. But Lilliman makes light of it, thinking Evie is initiating roleplay. Just as he begins forcing himself on her, V breaks through the door. As Evie runs away, Lilliman gets a pistol but V disarms him later. A surveillance van hears Lilliman pleading for his life. Later, Vincent and Dominic stand beside Lilliman's corpse when Creedy appears. Finch notices the bishop holding the same rose found with Prothero. Creedy then informs Finch that Sutler demanded Creedy's intervention as Sutler suspects someone from Nosfire could be helping V. Creedy also tells him to cease investigations regarding Larkhill. Meanwhile, E.T. ends up on Gordon's doorstep. Gordon lets her in and she explains what happened. Gordon tells Evie not to worry as cops would never suspect her there. To lower Evie's guard, Gordon decides to show her secret room where he keeps his collection of illegal, banned, or blacklisted items in Britain. He then tells her that the collection would be a bigger problem than Evie if the police were searching the house. The bishop found Evie to be older than his usual request. This could indicate that the bishop could be involved in acts much more sinister. With another one of Nosfire's prominent members dead, settlers become paranoid, turning on their fellow party members. Creedy has also asked Finch to stop investigating Larkhill, making Finch more curious about what happened at the facility. It also appears that Gordon is more similar to V in more ways than one. They both hide behind a mask. If V uses his mask to show the world his true self, Gordon uses his mask to hide the truth within himself. Evie then sees several photos of homosexuals on the wall. Gordon then reveals he's a closeted homosexual. Evie gets confused but Gordon explains that he had invited Evie to supper in his house as it would have been a good way to hide his true sexuality. At a morgue, Finch speaks with Dr. Delia Searage, and she reveals that Lilliman's cause of death is similar to Pradhar's. Finch then hands her the rose V leaves at the crime scenes and she identifies it as a Scarlet Carson but she gives a worried look. Later at the station, Finch and Dominic find that V has killed almost everyone connected with Larkhill except for one. He hurries out upon learning that the woman is Delia. At her home, Delia takes out a diary from her vault. In her bed, Delia wakes feeling V's presence. Delia talks to V telling him she didn't know what the people at Larkhill were going to do to him. When she got involved at Larkhill she thought she'd be helping the country, like Oppenheimer. V then tells her that her involvement made the events at Larkhill possible and for that, she won't be spared. He then produces a syringe revealing that he had already injected her while she was sleeping. V then hands her a rose. Finally, she apologizes to V before closing her eyes. Finch and Dominic arrive mere moments later but are too late. With Delia's death, we gain a little more insight into what happened at Larkhill. They have done some sort of experiments on political prisoners, all in search of advancement, or at least, that's what Delia thinks. Her comparing herself to Oppenheimer, the man who created the atom bomb, can be a good peek in her mind. Oppenheimer's success is built upon the death of hundreds and thousands. Delia also wanted to impact history in such a way regardless of how many lives were on the line. Also, something of note is V's method of killing. He can easily kill with his hands or daggers, but he chooses a lethal injection. This could be a form of poetic justice. He's doing to these people what had been done to him. Finch later speaks with Sutler regarding Delia's diary. Sutler appears to know what's inside and stresses the importance of keeping the contents concealed. He declares the talk of the diary and its content will be treated as an act of treason. He adds that there could be no way for anyone to tell if the diary is legitimate and not a forged creation from V. The diary narrates what happened at Larkhill 20 years in the past. The first entry details the first batch of subjects. Delia is excited and optimistic about her involvement as she argues Larkhill could begin a new age of biological warfare. Nuclear weapons and bombs would be obsolete as a virus could wipe out a country with its wealth intact. She later sees Prothero and Lilliman visit the facility and approve the operation. Soon 75% of the subjects are dead. One case keeps Delia's hopes alive. The subject doesn't show a negative immune system response. Mutation in the subject's blood seems to have developed heightened kinesthesia, increased physical abilities, and faster reflexes. Sadly, the subject has lost all of his memory. This subject is kept in room number 5, marked with the Roman alphabet V. On November 5th, at midnight, an explosion destroys the facility. Dahlia sees the last remaining subject rise from the flames. She feels the subject staring at her, and when he screams, all she hears is pain and vengeance. Now, we get a much clearer picture of what happened in Lakhill. Dahlia had spearheaded a project to find a new superweapon, a bioweapon capable of bringing the country to its knees. She had also inadvertently created VV was one of the prisoners in Lakhill, and as he was experimented on, mutations in his body develop increased speed, stamina, strength, reflexes, and possibly even intelligence. It appears that V's main purpose is to exact revenge, but it's unclear why he wishes to blow up Parliament. Later, Finch goes through some old news reports, looking for information about the St. Mary virus and its progress into a nearby water treatment plant called Three Waters. The virus had apparently been a biological attack from a fraction of religious extremists opposing the government. Dominic comes in and notices Finch looking pale. Finch then asks Dominic a hypothetical question: play attack on the country was not the work of religious extremists but the work of the government itself. That evening, Gordon and Avery watches Gordon's talk show. Gordon says he had thrown out the approved script from the government and wrote a new one. The show presents a parody of Sutler. A man dressed as V also appears in the show, and chaos starts. Sutler, V, the show's dancers, and the soldiers are seen running around to whimsical music. V is unmasked and is revealed to be another Sutler. The soldiers then shoot both of them at the request and the show ends. People at their homes all laughed and enjoy the show. But Sutler, also watching, is outraged. Evie is concerned about the ramifications of the show. But Gordon assures her that everything would be fine. He argues that you probably just have to issue a public apology and everything would be back to normal. Finch appears to be coming up with his theory of what happened with the St. Mary's virus spread. Unfortunately, the closer he gets to the truth, the less he wants to find out. Gordon has just entered a world of hurt. He's confident that Sutler will just give him a warning that everything should be back to normal in no time. It appears that V has influenced Gordon into making a conscious decision to go against the government. Unfortunately, Gordon fails to remember that no one is safe in Sutler's regime. Evie reminds us that people have been to jail for far too less. Later that night, Gordon bursts into her room, telling her to hide. Evie hides under the bed as Creedy and his men arrive. F stares in horror as they take Gordon away. She gets out of the window but somebody grabs her. She then finds herself in a room with a man. The man tells her that she will be sent to death if she didn't say where V is. She doesn't comply and is taken away, gets her head shaved, and gets tortured. She spends days in isolation in her cell until she notices a piece of paper hidden in a hole in the wall. It's an autobiography of Valerie. Bellari had been born in 1985 and she never narrates her early teen years as a lesbian. Valerie became an actress and moved to London with her girlfriend, where Scarlett Carson's kept in her apartment smelled like roses. Unfortunately, Nosfire got into power and people who are of a different race, gender, or political opinion were rounded up. Her partner Ruth was first taken, and then she followed not long after. Later, she has been told that she has one last chance left before she gets sent to die. The man tells her that she only needs to give them a small piece of information and should be freed. Evie says she's ready to die and then tells her that she's no longer afraid and she is free to go. Evie is confused and begins walking out of her cell. She sees the guard there is a mannequin. As she walks further, she finds herself back in the shadow gallery. This is Evie's only time getting a first-hand account of what happens to prisoners. Valerie's story resonates with Evie's could be the fact that Evie's parents could have potentially been forced through the same thing. Just as how Valerie slowly lost her will to live. Evie must have also thought about her parents and how they might have also been stripped of their humanity and had their will to live turned away. V appears and Evie is in complete disbelief at what has happened to her. V reveals that it had all been an elaborate ploy. V argues that he had done what he did to Evie because he wanted to get rid of her fear. Evie shouts at V telling him he's evil. We reasons that Evie could have stopped everything had she given in and told V's location. He knows that something has changed in Evie. When V himself was being tortured, he thought that he would die with hatred in his veins, but something changed with him, and the same thing has changed in Evie. V has used deception to make Evie realize something about herself. Just as lies can be used to hide the truth, lies can also be used to reveal the truth. In this case, V has lied to Evie to help her find the truth in her. For Evie, it was true. For her, the government has taken her parents, then her brother, and now her. She thought that all she had left with her was her life, but in herself, she found something more important than herself. Unfortunately, V's process is questionable. He had gone through the same and was turned into a killing machine. But what might have worked for him, may not work for Evie. Evie appears more broken now than ever. Evie has trouble breathing and requests to go outside. V then leads her into a balcony where Evie feels the raindrops. Just as V has been burned in the fire, Evie also is reborn. Later tells V she intends to leave. V then shows her an altar dedicated to Valerie. V reveals that Valerie was in the cell next to him. Evie finally realizes V's reasons and why it is always about revenge for Valerie. For everyone Nosfire had wronged, and revenge for him. V asks her a favor, and that is to meet on November 5th. Evie then agrees and leaves. As she walks toward the streets, V throws his mask against a mirror and begins sobbing. V cries, but probably not, because he had succeeded and is once again alone. V has succeeded in liberating Evie. What does this mean for Evie once she returns to the outside world? As November 5th nears, Sutler is informed that the best method to blow the parliament will be through an airstrike. Creedy assures that they are arresting more people. But Sutler lashes at him, expressing the disappointment. Sutler tells Dascom to spread a message of fear, reminding the people why the government is necessary. Soon, news reports are filled with all sorts of news from civil wars in the former United States. Water shortages and sickness is rising in England. The people, however, are starting to see through the lies. At the station, Dominic uncovered cemented interests who had worked under Creedy directly. Finch recognized one of the names, Rockwood, and checks his emails to see if he had sent him a message. Wanting to find the truth, Finch agrees to meet. They meet at an old St. Mary's memorial where Rockwood meets them and tells them the truth. The story begins with Sutler being an up-and-coming politician. The more power he gets, the more aggressive his supporters become. The party then initiates a project in Lark Hall under the guise of searching for a biological weapon, but the true purpose was to round up all individuals the party deems unfit to live in the country, including homosexuals, political protesters, and people of a different races. Lark Hill burns down, but scientists successfully synthesize a virus and a cure. Creedy then suggests releasing the virus, not at their enemies but at the country itself. Three Waters, St. Mary's, and the train station were chosen for the virus release. Soon the country is fractured and divided. Amidst the chaos, Sutler rise to power. Soon, a cure is discovered, and it is the Nosfire party and Sutler to rescue the people. Viadox manufactures the cure with Prada's help, and as more cures are produced, the party gets richer. Several years later, religious extremists are caught, branded the attackers, and executed. With the people afraid and the Nosfire swooping in to save everyone, Sutler makes his meteoric rise as Chancellor. The ultimate plan had been launched and it succeeded with flying colors. The only loose end they have forgotten to take care of was V, and now, V has returned to undo what they have done. This is the reason why V wants to destroy everything that they have built, because it's built on top of piles of bodies. Ironically, it was still them who created their downfall. Had they not included V as one of their subjects, V would have not become what he is now, and they would have gotten away with everything. Finch offers to take Rockwood into protective custody, but Rockwood wants Creedy to be put under surveillance. Only when he feels safe, he will resurface. Later that night, V visits Creedy. He offers Creedy a proposition. V assumes there's a growing distrust between Sutler and Creedy, citing the presence of wiretap equipment in Creedy's home. He deducts that when he finally blows the parliament, Sutler would need to have someone to blame for the government's failure to stop V, and it would be Creedy. Furthermore, V says that Creedy already knows this and has come up with a plan of his own. Creedy admits and V proposes in exchange. V agrees to surrender to Creedy, with condition that Sutler is brought to V. At the station, Dominic and Finch get a call, telling them that Rockwood has been dead for 20 years. Finch realizes it was V he had been speaking to. V pretending as Rockwood asked Finch to put wiretaps on Creedy, planting the evidence he would later use to convince Creedy that Sutler is spying on him. He had faked being Rockwood. The information he had given may still have merit. Nevertheless, Finch is extremely disappointed in himself for pursuing the Lark Hill incident rather than finding better ways to find V. Later, Sutler is fuming at their meeting. Creedy tries to reason out, but Sutler rejects the excuses for the failure to capture V. Meanwhile, packages containing folks' masks are being delivered to every house in London. Finch finally sees all the pieces fall into place. Everything that has happened becomes clear to him. With all the chaos, a catalyst would bound to happen that would finally shift the people's favor away from Nosfire. Sutler then responds in the only way he knows how, a show of military might. We would have to do nothing and keep his word and destroy the parliament, as it will further push the people against Nosfire. Sutler's arrogance is the reason for his downfall. He is the most expected to understand that relationships in politics can turn at the drop of a needle. With him being picky with Creedy, it is only a matter of time before something strikes up. The continuous series of events happening right now is a very realistic example of a bigger picture here with Guy Fawkes, along with the collapse of the former United States, which then led to Nosfire accidentally creating V, as V seeks to decentralize everything. They are all falling like dominoes, each leading to the destruction of the other. It's November 5th and Finch prepares himself for what could be the country's turning point. At the Shadow Gallery, V is surprised to see Evie fulfilling his request. V asks Evie for dance, and although finding it a little odd but agrees when V says that a revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having. At another meeting, the Sutler is once again shouting at the League Party members. He says that he will address the people directly. Dascom raises the possibility of V succeeding, and Sutler replies by declaring that if anything were to happen to the building, he expects Creedy's immediate resignation. V and Evie dance in the Shadow Gallery. And Evie finds the irony of V being the most influential person in her life. Yet she has no idea who he is and hasn't even seen his face. V says that his face is relevant as he has lost his identity. It appears that the mask is now who he truly is. Later, Dominic and Finch talk about the excessive military placement outside Parliament. Dominic then drops Finch off near a subway entrance as he will be searching the underground for any signs of V's final request to see Evie was also that he could have one final dance with her. This could be seen as V's way of doing things that he had never done in his life. On the eve of this revolution, he only asks that you get to dance one last time. It appears that Sutler and Creedy's relationship is completely broken down at this point. Meanwhile, V shows Evie his gift. They arrive at an underground tunnel where V shows Evie a train filled with tons of homemade explosives. Evie guesses that the tracks must lead to the Parliament, and V tells her that the train is his gift. He leaves her the decision whether or not to send a train to the Parliament. When asked why, V answers that the world and the people who had created him will end that night. By the next day, it would be the people who would be in charge of how the world will be shaped, and so, the decision to destroy Parliament would be entrusted to the people whom Evie represents. V then heads to meet with Creedy but stops him to come with him and sends him instead so they could escape and start a new life, but V refuses to say his fate has let him do this. Evie then kisses him and he disappears into the tunnels. Chancellor Sutler addresses the nation, telling them that anyone found with a mask will be treated as an enemy of the state and would be shown no mercy. He asks the people to remain as they are and unite against V, but it is shown that nobody is listening to the broadcast. V then meets with Creedy. Creedy then drags a man with a sack over his head. When removed, it was Sutler, sobbing and snoring and covered in blood. V approaches and gives him a rose, telling Sutler that everything he had done finally comes to haunt him. Sutler begs for his life, but Sutler takes out his gun and shoots Sutler in the head. We believe such a strong parliament is the beginning of the people's decision to break free from an oppressive government. He also believes that this decision lies with the people. And so he allows Evie to choose as she is part of the people. Sutla's death is also something to take note of. He had been kidnapped, beaten up, and eventually killed. Another case of poetic justice, as this could very well up in the same way as that the people Nosfire had kidnapped could have gone through in their final moments. Sutla had experienced it firsthand. We had finally done what he had thought to do. Creedy has no intention to let him out alive. We is confident that when Creedy and his men fire on him, he would still be standing. Creedy gives the order and everyone shoots. We gets peppered with bullets, but to everyone's surprise, we still stands after everyone runs out of bullets. We then begins his attack, swiftly cutting and slicing through them elegantly. Creedy's men fall one by one till he is left alone. Creedy manages to reload and unload his bullets on V. V takes all the shots and states that under the mask is not flesh and bone but an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. He grabs Creedy by the neck, choking him before snapping his neck. V then stumbles back into the tunnels before falling in Evie's arms. V tells her that he is dying and that he has waited for this moment for 20 years. He then admits that for years his heart had been filled with nothing but hate. With his dying breath, he told Evie that everything has changed when they met. She has taught him to love once again. Evie sees V dies in her arms. Meanwhile, the military prepares for anyone to show up near Parliament. People start appearing, and with no response from Creedy and Sutla, the soldiers are left with a hard decision. The people keep approaching and their commander orders them to stand down. The people then jump the barriers, passing by the soldiers, and continue their way to Parliament. We had survived being peppered with bullets by wearing a steel plate of armor. Sadly, other parts of his body were exposed. Creedy was expected to rise to power upon Sutla's death. But we quickly put an end to that dream. The experiments at Lark Hill have also proved useful in his final battle. His increased stamina, speed, and strength help him survive. With Sutla dead, the people are now ready to take the streets and their freedom. Evie places V on the train and Finch arrives. He points a gun at Evie and demands to step off the train, but Evie refuses to tell him he was right about how the country and the people need to change. Deep down, Finch knows that that's right. As the clock strikes 12, November the 5th arrives and Evie pulls the lever to activate the train, sending V and the bombs to their final destination. She leads Finch outside to witness the spectacle. Outside, thousands are waiting near Parliament. The people watch on as music fills the air. Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture once again echoes through the streets. Though a crowd now waits for a concerto, no conductor appears. As the music ends, the explosions begin. Parliament is engulfed in fire and the explosions climb up the clock tower. The crowd watches, unsure of what the future holds for them and their country. Though they don't know what would happen tomorrow, the choice would be entire theirs. One man is making sure that whatever they decide to do, it would be by their own decisions, by their own hands, and for the betterment of their country. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if this episode has made your day better. Also, subscribe to the channel to never miss an update. Do comment if you think that the movie has some effect on the COVID-19 pandemic and Biden's rise to power. See you next time.